Welcome to Infidelity Truths. Before we dive into today's gripping story, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us create more thrilling stories just for you. Let's begin. Tom had always been the kind of man who valued quiet love. To him, a relationship was built on sincerity, on partnership in small and big things, on sharing plans and even silences. He had been married to Emma for 3 years and believed they had something solid, something that grew over time. So when they were having coffee together one random morning, he didn't expect that an apparently harmless comment would change everything. While stirring the sugar in her cup, Emma remarked almost with a tone of regret, "Did you know Ryan was dumped by his girlfriend?" Tom raised his eyes, surprised. He swallowed what was in his mouth and calmly asked, "How do you know that?" She seemed to surprise herself. She hesitated for a moment and then responded, avoiding direct eye contact, "Oh, I saw it on his social media." Tom furrowed his brow. "You follow him?" It took her longer than it should have to respond. Yes, I mean, not exactly, but I see it sometimes." "Do you talk to him?" She shrugged, uncomfortable. "Very rarely. Every now and then, he sends a hi, asks if everything's okay. That's all." Tom rested his elbows on the table and looked straight at her. "Why have you never told me about this?" Emma sighed, as if the question was exaggerated. "It's no big deal. I didn't think it was necessary." "But telling me that he broke up with his girlfriend, that was necessary?" She went silent for a few seconds. "It slipped out. I didn't mean to say it. I didn't want you to think anything of it." Tom stayed quiet, not because he lacked words, but because he was trying to understand the intention behind it all. The comment about Ryan hadn't come by accident. No one mentions an ex, especially with empathy, without a reason. It was as if deep down, she wanted him to know, as if she was testing his reaction or leaving clues, even without admitting it. From that day on, Tom began to view Emma's behavior through a different lens. The messages on her phone that she tried to hide, the shy laugh while alone in the corner of the room, the way she changed the subject when he approached, all of it started to bother him, not out of jealousy, but out of doubt, out of a lack of transparency. She was different, and that alone was enough for him to lose peace of mind. On a Saturday afternoon, Emma was sitting on the couch, typing on her phone. Tom, from the other side of the room, watched silently. She chuckled lightly, but noticing he was looking at her, she immediately turned the screen face down. Tom said nothing, just noted her reaction. The more he thought about it, the more he realized the distance between them wasn't accidental. It was being built gradually through the messages she hid, the half-truths, the names she avoided saying. That night, while Emma slept, Tom stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. He tried to pinpoint the exact moment when things had started to change, and everything led back to that morning, that coffee, that phrase. "Did you know Ryan was dumped by his girlfriend?" It wasn't just an offhand comment. It was a thin line crossed between the past and the present, between respect and doubt. And now, even though he still wanted to believe it was just a fleeting distraction, a silly coincidence, deep down he knew this story was going to unfold in a way he wasn't ready to face. On Thursday night, Emma casually mentioned she'd have to travel over the weekend to visit a sick cousin in another city. She said it was urgent, that her cousin was having a severe migraine crisis and needed help taking care of the house and her young child. As she spoke, she kept glancing at her phone, as if checking details, trying to reinforce her story with some naturalness. Tom listened in silence, nodding briefly. On the outside, he appeared calm. Inside, something stirred slowly, an old sensation, similar to the feeling of knowing you're being misled but wanting to be sure before reacting. On Saturday morning, Tom woke up early. He had coffee alone, his head full. He tried to distract himself by organizing some things in the garage, checking emails, but everything seemed to push him back to the same question. Why would she lie about this? He thought about the last few days, about how coldly Emma had been handling some conversations, how she avoided eye contact or answered questions with subtle evasions. The pieces were there, scattered, and the sudden trip was another move he couldn't accept passively. After lunch, he picked up his phone. He took a deep breath before making the call. He knew that if he was wrong, it would cause tension. But if he was right, he'd have confirmation of what he was still refusing to admit. He searched for the contact of Emma's aunt, her mother's sister, a simple woman who was always kind to him, and dialed. She answered on the second ring with her usual voice. Hi, dear, how are you? It's Tom. Hi, Tom, everything okay here and there? He tried to keep the tone light. All good? Look, I called just to check on Sarah. Emma mentioned she was sick with a really bad migraine. Is she better? There was a 2-second silence on the other end. Sick? Sarah's fine. She worked normally this week, including this morning when she left early with the kid. Did Emma say that? Tom swallowed hard, trying to mask his reaction. Then I must have misunderstood. Maybe she got confused with another cousin. Maybe, but as far as I know, everyone's fine here. He thanked her, said goodbye politely, and ended the call. He stood there for a while, staring at his phone, his facial muscles tense, his stomach churning. A mix of anger and frustration. She had lied, just like that, made up an illness to justify a trip that now he knew wasn't what she claimed. And worse than the lie itself was the way she acted. As if it was normal to deceive him, as if it were just any decision. Tom spent the rest of the day quiet. He walked around the house as if trying to find meaning in his own steps. At night, he went for a walk around the neighborhood to clear his mind. The memory of Emma saying she was going to help someone in need contrasted with the freshly uncovered truth, and no matter how hard he tried to come up with a plausible justification, maybe she really needed some time alone. Maybe she was confused. There was something worse than the lie, the fact that she felt comfortable using it so easily. On Sunday night, when she returned, the house was silent. Tom was sitting on the living room couch, already waiting. As soon as she walked in the door, he slowly stood up, crossed his arms, and said, without beating around the bush, I called your aunt. She said Sarah is fine, and that you weren't there. Emma stopped in the middle of the living room, surprised. She froze for a few seconds, then let out a short sigh, as if giving in. I just needed some time alone to be at peace, to think a little. I made that up because I thought it was better than explaining. Better for whom? He shot back firmly. Lying is more convenient than being honest? She crossed her arms and looked away. I just wanted to breathe, to feel like I could make a decision without having to justify everything. It was just a weekend. So why make something up? If you needed time, why didn't you say so? She hesitated, her voice breaking. Because I knew you'd react badly, that you'd want to understand, ask a million questions. And you prefer that I find out you lied? Does that seem lighter to you? Emma then sat on the edge of the couch, her eyes watery. She said she hadn't done anything wrong, that she only stayed at a simple hotel, that she spent the days reading, walking, thinking about life, that she didn't see anyone, that she didn't meet Ryan or anyone from her past, and that she just wanted to get away from everything for a while. Tom listened, but his face no longer showed any trace of trust. Then answer me one thing, he said in a colder tone. Did you distance yourself from me, or did you move towards something else? She started crying. Tom remained standing, silent. Her tears didn't erase what he had already understood. A line had been crossed, and even though excuses kept coming, the doubt had already settled in. The next morning, Tom woke up earlier than usual. He had slept poorly, his body tired and his mind restless. He got up, made coffee, paced back and forth, trying to organize his thoughts. Emma's words from the night before still echoed. She had admitted to lying but justified it with an empty excuse, as if it were acceptable to deceive someone just to have peace for a weekend. She said she just needed time, but Tom knew the issue wasn't the time. It was what she did with it when he wasn't around. He spent the day withdrawn, speaking little, thinking too much. It was eating him up inside. He could no longer look at Emma with the same ease. Something between them had broken in a way that was hard to fix. She tried to act as if nothing had happened. She prepared dinner, made casual comments, but Tom saw in her eyes a constant discomfort, as if she, too, was trying to convince herself that everything was still the same. And it wasn't. That night, after a long silence at the table, he got up, grabbed a backpack from the closet, stuffed some clothes and personal items into it, and put on his shoes, as if he had already made the decision days ago. Emma, seeing this, approached slowly, as if sensing what was coming next. "What are you doing?" she asked, her eyes fixed on his movements. "I'm leaving for a few days," he replied, without changing his tone. "I need to think." She tried to contain her nervousness. "We can talk, Tom. You don't need to do this. I already told you nothing happened." "And that's exactly the problem," he retorted. "You say nothing happened, but if I hadn't found out on my own, I wouldn't even have known there was something to ask about." Emma stood frozen in the hallway, hugging her arms, her shoulders hunched. "You're acting like I cheated on you." Tom spun his car keys around his finger and responded, "You may not have touched anyone, but you lied, hid, avoided, and chose to trust your ex instead of opening up to me. For me, that's enough to need some distance." She tried to interrupt, but Tom turned his back and left. He didn't yell, he didn't slam the door. He simply left with the firmness of someone who had already passed the point of arguing. Emma watched the car disappear through the window. It was the first time in 3 years of marriage that Tom had walked out. The following days were a mix of anger and emptiness. Tom stayed at a simple hotel without telling anyone. He brought his laptop, tried to occupy his mind with work, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the same scene. Emma standing in the living room, her face worn, trying to minimize what she had done, as if it were normal to make up trips and hide messages. He remembered her words, her restrained tears, the way she avoided his gaze when he questioned her. It hurt because he loved her, and precisely because of that love, the disappointment hit harder. On Wednesday, it was almost evening when he decided he needed to go back home. The decision wasn't easy, but inside him, there was a conflict between what he felt and what he believed. Part of him wanted to truly listen to Emma, to understand if there was any chance of rebuilding. The other part just wanted the certainty that he was doing the right thing by stepping away. He drove back with a heavy heart, but with the hope of perhaps hearing from her a more mature attitude, a whole truth, a sincere apology. He thought about how to start that conversation, imagined the right words, the boundaries he needed to set, the agreements that needed to be redefined. He even imagined that she might have spent the last few days alone, reflecting, willing to show remorse. But nothing could have prepared Tom for the sight he encountered when he turned the key and entered the living room of his own house. On the couch, with a beer in hand and his feet propped up on the coffee table, was Ryan. The same Ryan she swore only sent a "hi" every now and then, the same Ryan she said was part of her past. He was sitting there, as if he belonged to the furniture. Tom stopped, the door still slightly ajar, and stared at the scene in silence for a few seconds. Ryan raised his head and with a relaxed smile said, "Hey man, what's up? I'm Ryan." Tom closed the door slowly, approached cautiously without averting his eyes. His heart was pounding, his blood circulating hotter. He spoke firmly, without yelling, but with an intensity that filled the room. "Get up and get out of my house. Now." Ryan was surprised, but stood up, dropped the beer on the table, and started walking toward the door. "Calm down, man. I just came to visit. Emma said that—" "Get out. Just walk to the door. Don't even finish your sentence." As Ryan left, Emma appeared in the hallway, her hair wet, wearing a robe. She had wide eyes, shocked to see them face to face. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Tom didn't even look directly at her. He was still staring at the open door where Ryan was leaving in silence. "What was he doing here?" he asked dryly. Emma stood still, breathing deeply. "He just came to visit me. It was his idea. I didn't even know you were coming back today." Tom turned his face toward her, anger still locked in his gaze. "You want me to believe he just showed up, walked in, sat down, and opened a beer? He stopped by chance?" she insisted. Tom laughed humorlessly. "By chance? On our couch, drinking comfortably?" She tried to say something else, but he raised his hand and cut her off. "Pack your things too. You're leaving today. Emma's eyes widened, and she took 2 steps forward. Are you kicking me out? I'm protecting what little dignity I have left. Then he turned his back, climbed the stairs without looking back, leaving Emma there, motionless in the middle of the living room. She didn't say another word, because any word at that moment would only serve to prolong a silence that was already screaming inside. The next morning, Tom called the lawyer and started the process. He was calm, but it was the kind of calm born from exhaustion. When you realize there's no turning back, that what's broken can't be rebuilt with words. He didn't want to hear more promises, justifications, or explanations like, it was unintentional, or you misunderstood. He had heard it all, and now he saw clearly, no love survives lies dressed as indifference. Emma was staying at her parents' house, where she spent the night after the argument. She sent long messages, asking him to reconsider, to wait until things cooled down. Tom read everything, but didn't respond. He preferred silence, because silence said more than any speech he could write. In the following days, she kept trying to reach out. She said what happened was an exaggeration, that Ryan really had just shown up by chance, that it was just a brief visit. She asked to talk in person. Tom refused, not out of resentment but for protection. It was as if every new phrase from her was another attempt to soften something that, to him, was unbearable. What hurt the most wasn't Ryan sitting on that couch, but what she allowed with such normalcy, as if everything was fine, as if he, the husband, had become a detail in his own story. The divorce was processed without a legal battle. Tom didn't want money, property, or disputes. He wanted peace. He wanted distance. Emma signed the papers at a small notary office, with a lost look. She still believed that, with time, Tom would change his mind. She said this to mutual friends, tried to justify her actions as a phase, a small mistake with disproportionate consequences. She still hadn't understood what, to Tom, was obvious. What destroys a marriage is rarely a big act, but rather the small gestures that erode trust until nothing remains. Months passed. Tom slowly reorganized his life. He moved houses, neighborhoods, routines. He kept in touch with a few friends, refocused on work. He avoided social media, parties, events. He chose to live away from noise, exposure, and other people's curiosity. He was rebuilding his way of breathing, trusting, and being with himself. The pain wasn't as present anymore, but every now and then it would return, triggered by simple details. A place they used to frequent, a song, but he didn't cling to them either. It was a process, and Tom respected each step of it. It was during lunch with an old friend that he learned what had happened. Then friend mentioned almost casually that Emma and Ryan had officially started dating, that they had been together since just a few weeks after the divorce. Tom listened in silence without any visible reaction. The friend continued, saying they seemed happy, posting pictures together, and even talking about moving into the same apartment. Tom didn't respond. He thanked him for the company, paid the bill, and walked away with firm steps, without anger but with something different pulsing inside, a kind of confirmation he hadn't asked for, but that arrived too late to make any difference. 3 months later, Tom received a new message on his phone. It was from Emma. She wrote that she had made mistakes, that Ryan had cheated on her with a coworker, and that everything had fallen apart. She said she felt lonely, that she thought about him often, that she revisited their conversations and realized how much she had exaggerated, how reckless she had been. The message was long. It contained confession, regret, and between the lines an attempt to reconnect. Tom read each word, as if watching rain fall outside, present but distant. It ended with a sentence that sounded like a plea. I'd like to talk. Just talk. You were the only one who truly knew me. He stared at the phone screen for a while. Memories came flooding back, but his heart remained quiet. There was no more pain, just certainty. Their story had ended long before the papers were signed. The betrayal wasn't just Ryan being in the house, but the conscious choice to ignore the limits of respect. Emma hadn't understood that, and maybe she never would. Tom responded with few words, not with coldness but with clarity. You closed a door. I just locked it from the inside. I wish you the best, but I've started a new life, one where I don't have to doubt what I feel or justify what I deserve. He hit send, blocked her contact, and put the phone in his pocket. He went for a walk, as he did every afternoon, and for the first time in a long time, he noticed he was walking without weight on his back, without the anxiety of checking the past at every corner. There was nothing more to understand, and that, by itself, was liberating. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like this.